everyone, and welcome to the Town of Osoyoos Committee of the Whole meeting, December the 10th, 2024 at 9 a.m. in council chambers. Do we have any late items? No, thank you. Could we have the approval of the agenda, please? Councillor King, Councillor Chong, all in favor? Thank you. And we need the adoption of some minutes from the Committee of the Whole minutes on November the 26th. Could we have a motion for that, please? Councillor Bennett, Councillor Poderica, all in favor. Thank you. And first up today, we have the RCMP here, and Sergeant Beta is here, and
Constable McNeil.
yes,
Constable Ian McNeil.
And Councillor Ian, who got the prize last year, didn't he, for the event in January? Isn't? Oh, was it? Well, anyway, he's a great constable as well. Counselor, maybe. Anyway, welcome to both of you. And Sergeant Beta is going to talk about the third quarterly report today.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, for having us. The reason I brought Constable Ian McNeil here is I just wanted to make sure everyone knew who he was. Ian has been in the acting corporal position for a number of months and will be for the foreseeable future. So he'll be, in essence, he's the second in leadership in the RCMP locally. So he will be your point of contact if I happen to be away at any time. So, and if I happen to be away during the council meeting, Constable McNeil will be doing these presentations. So yes, we're going to talk about the Q3 stats for 2024. That covers the period of July and August and September. Typically busy months for us with the summertime. So we showed from Q3 of 2024, looking back at 2023, we had a 12% increase in file load. I'm not going to go through all the stats with you. I find it gets boring doing that, but certainly you can ask me questions about anything. I'll just go through some of the highlights. One thing that we do is we show the numbers of calls for each quarter, and then we show a percentage. And just a reminder that the percentages are something that could alarm us. But when we really look at the numbers, when we look at intimate partner violence, we show 100% increase. But that was because we went from one file to two files. So we're talking small town, we're talking about small either increases or decreases. So I don't look too much at the colors, I look at the overall files. One thing that we have been dealing with in Osoyoos, but not only in Osoyoos, but throughout the whole Okanagan, is stolen vehicles. We're getting a lot of vehicles stolen from this area, from throughout the Okanagan. We've identified two individuals, a male and a female, and we've arrested them a few times now on stolen vehicles, and they're currently in custody waiting their next appearance. We know that they are active from Pemberton all the way to Nelson. These are areas we caught them in a vehicle in Oakland. Well, it started in Oliver and ended up catching them in OK Falls. Now is a vehicle they stole from Pemberton. We also know that they've had vehicles from here in Nelson or vehicles from Nelson into our area. So they're operating at a very big, in a very big range. And they're people that we consider dangerous to us. In the Oliver incident, there's video of it. One of the locals took video of them actually trying to run over a police officer who's standing on the side of the road. So, and luckily that police officer was able to get out of the way. So we're proactively doing everything we can. When they get out, we are on them, and we'll do everything we can to keep them in jail and hopefully decrease the thefts of vehicles. We had an increase in mischiefs. I went through a bunch of these files, and I mean, there's a significant number of mischiefs when you look at the quarter, 25 alone in the quarter. A lot of these it's a whole mix of things. So we had a lot of it was children, actually. We had a 6-year-old child lighting a fire, and a neighbor saw, and parents took action right away. This was just a small fire outside, but nevertheless, it gets called to us, and it gets carded as a mischief. We had some youth smashing some bottles down at Cottonwood Park. And we had instances where people were using hot tubs of facilities that they weren't registered at. So those are things we get called to and to remove them. And we also had one person attribute to a number of the files, and that was an adult that was living with his parents, but he was suffering from alcohol addiction and was causing a number of issues while he was staying at his family's house, to where we were getting called each time. The last time he spent the night in jail with us, and seems to have gotten a picture because we haven't had any calls since then from him. So that's a bonus. The frauds, different types of scams and frauds we're seeing, internet and telephone frauds, often targeting the elderly. And so what we did is we had our community policing unit out of Penticton come down and do a talk at the Sonora Center. And that was in September. And that follows up another fraud presentation they did in June at Sunshine Ridge. So we're proactively trying to basically instruct or teach people how to prevent themselves from being subjects of fraud. I also want to mention that we have 2 new members that have been named to transfer in. They are actually members that live in the community already and have been working in different sections outside of Osoyoos. One Constable Dave Fallman, who's in the BC Highway Patrol traffic section, is going to be transferring to our detachment as a GD constable, and that'll be probably within a week to 2 weeks from now. It'll be a fairly quick move because he lives in town, so we'll be able to get him here fairly soon, up and running. He's actually been working a lot for us over the summer. He's been working a lot of overtime shifts for us, so he's very familiar with the community and is extremely excited to come here. We also have another member named, I won't name them yet because it's sort of up in the air, but a potential another member moving in to the detachment that actually lives in the Osoyoos. But there's pending their backfill from where they are. So I'll once we get confirmation that they've been backfilled and will be moving here, which I hoping will happen in the next few months, then I'll introduce that member to you as well. So that's a quick rundown of the stats. I'm open to any questions if anyone has any.
I just have one first then, Jim. Can you explain what suspicious circumstances are? Like, is that different than mischief?
Yeah, that's when someone, we'll get a lot of calls of it could just be a person that's standing on the road in a neighborhood that someone doesn't recognize.
Oh, okay.
And we ask people to call us whenever they're concerned about things. If you're not sure what's happening, so we'll often attend and see if we can locate that person and talk to them. In most cases, over 90% of those cases, it's someone that's visiting someone else or someone that's doing business in the area. But so we just put it down as a suspicious circumstance, and we'll get suspicious vehicles as well. A vehicle parked in an area that someone doesn't recognize. So
Okay, thank you. Councillor King.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Going back to the auto theft, are they stealing those cars for kind of joyriding, or are they stealing to steal parts off them?
Well, it depends who's stealing them. The two I'm talking about, they are stealing mostly F-350s, large trucks. They're an easy vehicle to steal because they don't have an immobilizer on them, and they're using those vehicles to commit further crime, whether it's break and enters to other places. We have them on video actually in a stolen vehicle at businesses, committing break and enters at businesses. So it's a big vehicle that you have the box in the back that you can load up stolen goods in, and B, it's a vehicle that it can easily ram a police vehicle, and that's why we say these people are dangerous to us. They will not stop for us, and so we have to use other methods to try and apprehend them safely.
Another question. Thank you, Madam Mayor. When you give out speeding tickets, does the money stay in town or does it go somewhere else?
So the money goes to the province, and the town gets a portion of that. So my understanding is that all of the tickets in BC, if they're written on to the provincial fines, BC get collected, and then each town or city gets a small portion of that.
Can I ask, there's been quite a lot in the news lately about the police wearing body cameras, and I think they've started it in some places. Is that something that the people in the Okanagan have, police in the Okanagan, or are they doing some of the larger centers first? I just wondered.
Yes, so I'm not supposed to talk about body cameras
Oh.
so much because it's a national rollout. So we have our national media and our E-Division headquarters media speaking more to that. What I can say is that we are slated to get them, and so you should have them probably near the end of February, beginning of March. So every officer will have body cameras.
Thank you. It's just that I've seen it in the news quite recently, which is why I asked. Does anyone else have any questions or concerns? I just want to say that, that Sergeant Beta comes to the RDOS, along with the other commanders, of all 6 municipalities and and Superintendent McCandy, and about every 3 months. And it's really appreciated by everybody. And thank you as well, you and Constable McNeil, to come and fill us in. So,
Thanks for having us.
okay, and no other questions, then thank you very much.
Thank you.
And let's hope it's a quiet Christmas. Okay, we'll go on to staff reports, and first is the Sunrise Marina Boat Moorage Fee Review. Mr. Davis.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Council. This morning, I'm just going to bring forward a quick review of our marina and just hopefully get some discussion on a direction, how we should proceed. So just to give a little bit of history, the Desert Sunrise Marina has 32 slips. It's operated through a sub-license agreement with Osoyoos Shoreline Development, and that's from the get-go. This is how it was arranged. 16 of those slips belong to the town, one of which is the RCMP and our water quality as well. And then we have 4 commercial slips that goes under a different lease agreement with our business that's on site. And since we've opened in 2013, we actually haven't had any changes in our fees. The marina itself, we don't have any asset management protocols in terms of amortization or anything to that effect. And in 2025, we're planning to make some improvements to the boat launch, which has an estimated cost of $150,000. A portion of this has to do with power loading, and all the actual boats that go on at the launch there themselves. This is something that we've been keeping an eye on, and Wake Pilot was doing a great job to make sure that people weren't doing that. But obviously, over the years and in the time when they're not there, this continues to happen. There's also, when we were actually looking at the boat launch through our environmental biologist, we're looking at dredging the marina. And this is going to be a huge cost, apparently. In terms of some comparisons and in terms of our rate structure, the ones that were listed, a few are operated by local government, a lot of nonprofit societies. Some are very large, obviously, the ones in Kelowna. They have many amenities, restaurants, storage, fuel service, etc. Many have one-time annual memberships of 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 and beyond. And the capital improvement fees are quite common, something that we don't do or haven't done here as part of an asset management plan. And the fees on some of these places are based on the size of the vessel, so it's a per foot charge. So some options for council. In terms of our fees, we could increase our seasonal rates by $250 or more. Of the slips that we have, that would be an increase of $250 per season, which is April till October. We could initiate a capital improvement fee of $250 or more. That would be based on what our actual asset is worth in terms of replacement value of up to 3%, as what we've done before. And we could also add a consumer price index annually, which we have with some of our other bylaw fees for the cemetery, our recreation and fees charges as well. Or we can stay status quo. Any
Um,
questions or?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Davis. I certainly appreciate the fact that you looked at all these other marinas up and down the valley, because I think that's quite helpful for comparison. Can I ask it was a couple of years ago, and I can't remember when, that there was damage caused by the ice, and we put in some underwater fans or something like that, didn't we?
Yes.
In order to protect.
Yep,
Yeah.
they're actually going in this week. So they're aerators. And what they
Aerators.
do is they keep the water moving so we don't have a big block of ice just charging into the marina.
So they're taken out when the marina is being used and put in after when.
That is
in-
correct,
Okay,
yes.
because otherwise they would.
They just sit below the surface of the
Okay.
water and yeah, that's right.
And so we have had to, over the years, pay for some upkeeps on down there. That's one of them. And I think one of the docks was damaged by a boat or something. So that was a cost that we had to take, and which is why we probably need to have a little bit more money to cover these things if they're happening.
That's
that
correct. I'm not sure if that was if our CEO wants to address that, that'd be
Oh.
great.
I can
Go ahead.
I can answer a few questions on that. Yeah, so there's some damage at the boat launch. We do have an engineering firm looking at it. Within the budget documents that released last week, there's a service package in there for 150. But the unfortunate piece with that, and then I just got the update on the weekend, is we will not be able to actually fix it before the spring. There's a whole regulatory approval process, so it's likely a year and a half away. But if you've walked down there and taken a look at it, you can see that there is significant damage there. We will likely be doing some remediation work to make it a little bit safer. That estimate again just came in, I think it was yesterday, which isn't in the budget yet, which is probably around 30,000. So yeah, and they also indicated to us, as the environmental engineer was here, that that area will need to be dredged at some point. So there are a lot of costs to keep a marina operating, and as Mr. Davis has indicated, there really is no reserve to do that, and so I think what's being presented here is a start, but is nowhere near what it actually is going to cost to maintain that facility in the very near future.
Thank you. Councillor King?
Okay, Madam Mayor, do the people have to take their boats out for the winter months?
Oh, yes, yeah.
And has there ever been any thought of allowing them to stay there and charge them extra for the winter months? Some do, I see.
Yeah, some do in the Okanagan. Here, I don't think it would be feasible based on, ice buildup. Even with the aerators going, it still freezes. It's just that it's a less, it would be like the entire lake shifting in and hitting the dock as opposed to just what the ice is in the marina itself. So that's one of the reasons it hasn't been. But it's definitely not something that we couldn't look at.
Thank you. Councillor Bennett?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to say, reasoning, is there any recall back from the insurance from that truck or any of the boats that do the damage?
Your worship, no, it's gonna have to be on our dime, unfortunately, so.
Then I'd move option one.
Just a sec, we'll see if there's any more questions, and absolutely. Go ahead, Councillor Chong.
Thank you. In the formal sub-license agreement between the town and the Sewage Shoreline Development, are there stipulations towards shared costs for upgrades or maintenance of the facility?
Yes, there is actually. It's a 50-50 split. So in essence, anything that is done or initiated should be, shared in that respect. Yes.
So for additional clarification, the potential 150 grand for improvements would in essence be 75.
Technically, yes. Yeah.
Can I throw one thing? I think Wake Pilot has been managing it for quite some time down there, but I understand it's been sold. Or has someone else taken over Wake Pilot? It's the same company, but just a different owner? Is that correct? Okay, so I just wondered if it was the same contract with, Wake Pilot has a continuing contract?
It-
Whoever
it-
is the owner is, yeah.
Yeah, it's actually the same company, and even the same owner, is still involved and part of that.
Okay,
So I think, and don't quote me, but the new owner, or the potential new owner will eventually own it outright. But as far as I know, the original owner is still part and parcel of the business itself.
great, thank you very much. That what other people know too? I just wondered. Go ahead, do you have something else?
Just another point too, with a quick CPI calculation. If we haven't changed the fee since 2013, then with the actual calculation, it would technically should be just shy of 2,000 compared 1,500 from 2013 to what it would be valued now. So in terms of, I know there's kind of a motion on the table too. So could we, like, I would be, if it's okay with Councillor Bennett, I would like to do a friendly amendment and add option 2, or we can vote on them individually, whichever is a more feasible option.
So and Counselor Bennett, did you want to make, a recommendation? So it would be, number 1, which is to increase by 250 per slip. Would that automatically increase the shoreline development, or do they have their own, set of, like,
Um,
how would it work?
yeah.
Or is that only for our slip?
That is only for our slip, so
Okay.
as part of the agreement, they have, the right to do and charge what they want, and their fees are listed in here as well.
Okay,
So they have a monthly charge, and it'll actually go to, start out quite low, and then in the busy summer months,
they go
they're
up.
quite higher.
Okay, and so then you're also adding on, a capital improvement fee of 250, per slip. So that would be an increase of 500. Is
Yes,
that correct?
just to bring
Yeah.
it pretty close to what the CPI calculation should be.
Sure. Okay, yeah, yes.
With the boat ramp though, that's just belongs by the town. It's got nothing to do with the slips. So we're 100% responsible for the ramp? Or
Yes,
is it-
that is correct. It
Yeah,
is, the marina itself as a whole is 50/50.
Yeah.
And that's how it was developed, that's how it was built.
Mhm.
There was 2 or 3 different agreements. One was for the development and the creation. Once it was done, then it was for the operation. And that's what we have in place now. And that sub-license is in place with the province until 2040, I believe. And I think I mentioned that in the report.
Okay.
And that was extended originally, beyond that, because it wasn't that long originally. And, they've been actually good partners.
I agree with the
Yeah.
partners. I just want to understand the boat ramp, we're responsible 100%. We can't charge Watermark 50% for improvements.
No, it is a 50% across the board, yes.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
okay. Good, so it's been moved and I'm assuming seconded by, Counselor Bennett, Counselor Chong, that we, go with numbers 1 and 2. So in other words, an increase of 500, 250 twice. All right, there's no other questions, I'll ask, all in favor? Thank you very much. And thank you, Mr. Davis, for this. Oh, absolutely, go ahead.
Um, Has there been any consideration with like a boat launching fee for those who want to use the ramp just to launch the boats and but not storage in the marina itself?
Thank you very much, Counselor Chong. There's been a number of, when we originally did our, when we were talking about um, the buoys and whatnot that we were going to have on the lake in the last couple of years, and we had a couple open houses. Boat launch service is definitely something, especially for a resort municipality. You go to Harrison Hot Springs, you go to Cultus Lake, and it's anywhere from $7, $10, $15 to launch your boat, which is actually, quite common and normal. Parking, we don't charge anything for parking in our parking lot there. Cultus Lake, they make a lot of money in their parking lot, and it's for that purpose as well. The problem is collecting that money and having, how would we do that? Even though we have a, um, business on site at the boat launch, they're not there 24/7. And it might be tough to do that. And I'm not sure how they do that in those other places. If we had a sign up and we could, inform people that they would have to go get a permit and show that permit, and that could be in, places like the Sonora Center because we're open later, till 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, etc. That could be an option, but logistically speaking, it might be a little more difficult.
Would an automated gate system be a feasible option?
Possibly, just just the cost really at the end of the day. Yeah.
Thank you, Richard. I think there was some conversation at some point that we may need to at one point update the current boat lot parking system. Perhaps at that time that might be a good conversation to either look at maybe matching the rates for our boat lot versus our marina parking and kind of incorporate the two together.
So
You know,
excuse me.
you get free parking down at the marina, but you're paying to park your boat off-site. I think there's some, there is a benefit of convenience there, and I'm not, when you're looking at a route structure that does have some incentive, let's say to residents. But we know that parking there is limited and it's popular and full, and does create some controversy sometimes, I know, with the sailing club. But maybe that's something to look at that time.
Yeah, through your worship, I mean, just to add, yeah, we do get a lot of complaints. There really is insufficient parking down in that area. And I think the one of the positive things, just to see here, where we have at least increased the boat trailer parking lot fees annually. So I mean, that's one positive thing. We just haven't really cracked that whole nut on the boat launch and the parking down at the marina. One of the other issues that may arise that we've talked about was just how many access points there are on our lake. Like ourselves, we probably have 4 at least that people can use, maybe more depending on what type of boat you have. And then we also have the Haynes Point. So that one I know a lot of people use. So I think it's a good idea. It needs to be looked at. I think we've got to shift our focus to trying to recover as much funds as possible for these assets that are worth hundreds or even millions of dollars.
Thank you. So we'll continue this conversation at some time because looks like we need to look at it again. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Davis.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay, next is, do we need to, no, we don't have to approve anything? No. Short-term rental regulation review. And welcome, Mr. Garish, Ms. Duong. Please go ahead. We assume, oh, we do. We always have a good display on hand. Yes, all our notes. Okay, go ahead, please, Chris.
So I'll pass it over to Ms. Duong to run us through the presentation, and then happy to take questions at the end.
All right. So as council may have seen, this report was fairly lengthy. So I will try to do my best in providing a quick and concise overview of what was covered in that report. Thank you. Okay, so we'll just start by going over just a bit of background on how we got to the short-term rental regulation review project, and then I'll move through some of the legislative changes that have occurred, and then move on to the pilot program as proposed and future steps. So starting with the background, as council is aware, we began undertaking the zoning bylaw update back in 2022, and that the scope of that had captured 3 components. First of all, being the zoning bylaw review, which was just a update of previous zoning bylaw 1085, 1998, and that was completed back in September 2024. The second component was a review of the foreshore and lake zoning bylaw, which, as you may know, relevant provisions of that zoning bylaw were ultimately integrated into zoning bylaw 1395 when that was adopted. So that leaves us with the short-term rental regulation review, which remains outstanding, and we are excited to be able to progress that further. So in preparing the town's most recent OCP bylaw, a number of policies were included at that time, which spoke specifically to short-term rentals and the regulation of short-term rentals, as well as supporting a variety of forms of tourist accommodations. So next slide. Really the purpose of the short-term rental regulation review is to implement those policies that were put into place in the OCP bylaw, and also recommend various policies and programs that could be used to regulate short-term rentals within the town. So preliminary stages of this project were focused largely on community engagement. Urban Systems did undertake a number of consultation works with the community at that time. And just a bit of an overview of that. So this mostly occurred in 2023. It was largely done in the form of digital engagement. So a project webpage was created to provide additional information to the public regarding what the project was meant to entail. There were also public engagement sessions. I believe there were 3 of them. And an online survey was launched with respect to the project, which as a result showed that a majority of respondents to that survey did support the permitting of short-term rentals within the town. Next slide. As part of the early engagement works, this idea of a pilot program was also floated with the community. And the way that it was presented at the time was that for a period of 2 to 3 years, the town, as part of this pilot program, could allow short-term rentals within single detached or low density residential zones. And that would be within a principal dwelling unit, such as a single detached dwelling or a secondary suite. This pilot program would involve the issuance of 1-year permits, and that would be on a first come, first served basis, though renewals would also be contemplated with inspections and fees. And lastly, applicants would provide insurance, a parking space for their short-term rental, and submit a business license application in order to be issued an STR permit. So with respect to previous council consideration, largely, most recently in 2023 in the fall, council or committee was presented with an update on this project. And at that time, the committee did suggest to council that administration proceed with the next steps of implementing this project in 2025. And most recently in the spring of 2024, the committee of the whole did receive an update on the short-term rental regulation review timeline. So moving on now to the legislative changes and kind of the changes that we've seen at a local level in the town. As council may be aware, there have been a number of changes that have occurred since the fall of 2023. So really the legislative framework that we're working within has shifted, which has led us to do kind of an additional, more recent review. And this largely relates to the introduction of the Short-Term Rental Accommodation Act and regulation, as well as the new small-scale multi-unit housing provisions under the Local Government Act. The Short-Term Rental Accommodations Act received royal assent back in October 2023, and the primary purposes of that piece of legislation were to return short-term rental units to the long-term housing market, give local governments stronger tools to enforce short-term rental bylaws, and also establish this new role for the province in regulating short-term rentals throughout the province. So the suite of amendments had involved the introduction of a new principal residence requirement, and that would limit short-term rentals to the host principal residence and one secondary suite or one accessory dwelling unit on their property. And then as of May 1st, 2024, the principal residence requirement did automatically apply to a number of municipalities throughout the province, with the threshold being that they have a population of 10,000 or more individuals or residents. The Act did also provide a mechanism for local governments where this requirement didn't automatically apply to opt in. So at its meeting of March 12, 2024, Council did resolve to request to opt in to the principal residence requirement, and that requirement has come into effect as of November 1st, 2024. In making these amendments, the province had also introduced certain exemption criteria to the principal residence requirement. I'm just going to name a few because there's a number of them, but really the one I think that is most relevant within the town is an exemption that applies to strata titled hotels and motels that meet certain operational conditions where they operate similar to a hotel or motel, and where two or more of the strata lots have restrictions on their use as a principal residence. Some other categories that may also apply would be timeshares or parcels where there is fractional ownership that prevents an individual from living in those lots or on that property for, as their principal residence. And then next, as I think Council has heard many times, Bill 44 being the Housing Statutes Residential Development Amendment Act had required, amongst many other things, that a local government zoning bylaw be amended to permit minimum residential densities in restricted zones, and this applied throughout the province, really at differing levels based on the nature of those municipalities or electoral areas. So for the town, we were required to provide 3 to 4 dwelling units based on parcel size within restricted zones, and this largely applied to the low density residential zones within the town. However, as Council is aware, a request was submitted to and approved by the Minister of Housing for an extension to comply with those new small scale multi-unit requirements until December 31st, 2029. And as of September 24th, 2024, the Town of Vesuvius zoning bylaw 1395 was adopted, which did incorporate some of these small scale multi-unit housing requirements that came through under the Local Government Act. So we had introduced, as part of the zoning bylaw update, a new zone called the small scale multi-unit residential zone, or the RS1 zone, that permits a maximum of 2 dwelling units, and that either is in the form of a single detached dwelling with a secondary suite, or a single detached dwelling with an accessory dwelling, or a duplex dwelling. So moving on to, I think, the most interesting part, what have we come up with as part of this pilot program? So next slide, yes. So this pilot program, as I mentioned, was originally introduced back in 2023 and was used largely as part of the town's engagement to kind of get a sense of what the community thought with respect to regulating short-term rentals in the town. So we have had to modify this program as a result of the recent legislative changes that we've seen in the province. And this proposed modified pilot program would be implemented through a number of amendments, and that would be to the town's OCP bylaw, zoning bylaw, municipal ticket information bylaw, as well as the replacement of the business license bylaw, just given its age, as it was previously adopted back in 1997, I believe. So just to start with the permitted zones, the pilot program does propose to restrict short-term rental accommodations as an accessory use in the small-scale multi-unit residential zone, so that RS1 zone. And this would allow for a maximum of 1 short-term rental accommodation within a variety of options here, being a single detached dwelling, a secondary suite, an accessory dwelling, or 1 unit of a duplex. Now, short-term rental accommodation would not be permitted under this pilot program within an apartment or townhouse. So that would largely be within the medium density residential 1 or RM1 zone. And this was in response to feedback that was previously received from council as it relates to parking concerns in these zones. Short-term rental accommodations within a resort residential building, that's something that we carried over from previous zoning bylaw 1085. And so that would actually remain a permitted use within the resort commercial or CT4 zone. But that being said, it would be subject to meeting the provincial exemption criteria as mentioned for strata titled hotels and motels if they were to be issued a business license. So I'll touch more on that a bit later. Now, the short-term rental regulations that we have drafted with respect to zoning bylaw amendments, it would generally align with what we're seeing with bed and breakfasts as it relates to kind of the parameters that are being set. So for short-term rental accommodations, we'd be proposing to permit a maximum of 4 bedrooms with a maximum occupancy of 8 patrons, so about 2 people per bedroom at any one time. And also require 1 additional parking space for each bedroom within the dwelling unit that's to be used as a short-term rental. With respect to business licensing, an applicant would, or a property owner would need to apply for a business license. And as part of that, there would be supplementary documentation requirements to support a short-term rental specific business license. And that would include providing proof of principal residence status, as the town did opt into the principal residence requirement, or confirmation of an exemption being met. They would have to supply a floor plan which outlines the various bedrooms which would be rented out as part of that short-term rental. A health and safety inspection would need to be conducted, and I'll touch on that in the next slide. A fire evacuation plan would need to be provided, as well as a parking plan. In previous conversations with council, it was proposed that the applicant also provide valid insurance. We are proposing to not keep this as a requirement, predominantly because staff are simply not equipped to review insurance requirements, as well as monitor to ensure that insurance remains valid. Additionally, it's not standard across other local governments based on a review that we did to require insurance. So just a little bit more about a health and safety inspection, as I do believe this is somewhat new. So the real purpose of a health and safety inspection is to ensure that your basic health and safety concerns are being addressed when you're issuing these business licenses. Additionally, it allows for the inspector to see that the short-term rental would meet building code and zoning requirements, and also to verify compliance with occupancy limits. This is a common requirement by other local governments in the region, whether it be in the form of the inspector actually going on site and seeing the unit themselves, or to have some sort of self-attestation, which goes through various types of health and safety requirements. And lastly, a reason for including this type of requirement is that it would hold short-term rentals and bed and breakfast to a comparable standard that we would typically apply for other tourist accommodations that you see in the hospitality sector, so with hotels and motels. Now, in relation to the business licensing fee, currently the town's business license bylaw requires generally a $75 application fee, though this could vary for certain types of businesses. So the $75 fee was established back in 1997 when that bylaw was first adopted, and that would generally equate to about $42 now. So we do see this rate as being quite outdated at this time. So we are proposing what would likely be quite a significant deviation from what was previously in the business license bylaw. So we're proposing that the business licensing fee for both short-term rentals and bed and breakfast, since they're quite similar really when it comes to administration of these business licenses, we're proposing that be $750. So I think a good question would be, how does this compare to other SILGA members and other resort municipalities? So just to give a bit of an overview, with the SILGA members that we reviewed, their short-term rental business licensing fees do vary, and we see this ranging from $50 to $775, and that one's quite close to home, as it is from one of the other Okanagan local governments. With resort municipalities specifically and their short-term rental business licensing fees, we see that range from $75 to $519.70. That $519 fee was for one bedroom or sleeping unit, and then they actually charged additional add-on fees for additional sleeping units. And that's actually a somewhat common theme that I did notice across resort municipalities as I went through reviewing their business licensing fees. Now, council had also previously indicated with respect to business licenses and their issuance, a preference to impose a maximum number of short-term rental operations in the town. And that would be set at approximately 130 licenses. So that equates to approximately 5% of the housing stock within the town. We did not include this as part of our proposal, namely due to a number of challenges we found with the implementation of a cap. So this includes how staff would have to deal with conflict and disputes where demand exceeds licenses being issued or that could be issued. And in order to meet the first come, first serve kind of system, there is a concern that applicants may attempt to rush applications, which would lead to quite a bit of staff time being spent attempting to correct any incomplete applications. Queue manipulation is certainly something that we would be concerned about, where some people certain property owners may hire agents to essentially get in front of the line to make the cap. And additionally, just in consideration of administration of this system, it could be challenging given the limited staff resources that we do have. And as part of the suite of amendments that the province did make in relation to short-term rentals, one of the big things was that they did make amendments to allow local governments to impose greater municipal ticketing fines. So they had increased it from $1,000 per day for infraction up to $3,000 per day per infraction. So in support of this pilot program, we are proposing amendments to the town's municipal ticket information bylaw to establish specified fines for STR business licenses and non-compliance with advertisements. So if someone's attempting to advertise for greater bedrooms that they've been licensed for example, and also to establish fines for any short-term rental specific zoning infractions. So just a bit of a summary, since that was, I think, quite a bit of information. The proposed pilot program would provide for a maximum of one short-term rental per parcel in the RS1 zone, so the low density residential zone. Short-term rentals would need to comply with the set occupancy allowances and parking requirements that would be under the zoning bylaw. And additionally, business license applications would require a $750 fee and use specific documentation in order to proceed with that application and license issuance. And also, there would be new short-term rental specific non-compliance fines. So with respect to implications of this pilot program, really the whole purpose of launching a pilot program is to trial the regulations of short-term rentals. And it gives us an opportunity to monitor our successes and our shortcomings, and also adjust as we move forward if we choose to continue to regulate these types of uses. Importantly, with all the different changes that were made, the province did include a provision that indicates that any short-term rentals that are permitted under the pilot or just generally throughout the province, they would not be subject to any grandfathering rights. So they would not benefit from any non-conforming use rights or allowances. So that really is to say that if council decides in the future that they want to change the way that short-term rentals are regulated, it can do so without being really hampered by the operations that would have benefited from those non-conforming rights that would generally apply to other uses. So then moving on to, I think, some of the more supporting amendments. I'm just going to provide a quick overview of the OCP amendments, but really, the point of the OCP amendments that are being proposed, it's to reinforce the direction that council decides to set. So to ensure that the uses that are being proposed are consistent with what is being proposed under zoning currently, and to discourage any uses that don't meet those. So if someone were to come in for an application where they would like to have a short-term rental within a multifamily residential development, having that policy in place to identify that council would not be supportive of those circumstances. And additionally, there are some administrative policies that are included, which supports a regular review of the short-term rental program, as well as any business licensing fees and program administration, just to ensure that we're, operating in a cost recovery basis. Now, this is a bit tangential, but we do think that there is merit in reviewing this under kind of the overall umbrella of tourist accommodations or temporary accommodations that are being offered throughout the town. But just starting off with resort residential buildings, as I had mentioned, under the former zoning bylaw, short-term rentals were actually permitted within these resort residences, and we would normally see this in what was the former commercial residential zone, as well as some of the comprehensive development zones. Now, the zoning bylaw does carry forward this allowance, as I mentioned, for short-term rentals within resort residential buildings, and that would be within the new resort commercial zone, and that applies to approximately 4 parcels in the town. Now, these resort residential buildings are typically in the form of strata titled hotels and motels. Next slide. And as I mentioned, these types of operations may be exempt from the provincial principal residence requirement. However, this is under the stipulation that these units or these operations provide services that are provided, services are provided in a manner similar to that of a hotel or motel. And 2 or more of the strata lots are not able to actually be used as a principal residence, and that would be due to a restriction either under a rental management agreement, a restrictive covenant, or a land use regulation bylaw such as zoning. And as I mentioned, the zoning bylaw does allow for residential use of these resort residential buildings, so it would largely be focused on really whether the strata itself restricts the use of each unit for principal residence purposes. So as I mentioned, while the pilot program doesn't preclude the town from issuing business licenses for short-term rentals in resort residential buildings, it is somewhat challenging for administration due to the principal residence requirement and the exemption criteria that are laid out under the Act or the regulation. So the challenge predominantly coming from the fact that the town doesn't keep or collect records of the nature of these operations. So we don't really know what services are being provided, whether that's in alignment with the exemption criteria provided for under the regulation. And we also don't know the number of dwelling units that are utilized as a principal residence. So when we're issuing these licenses for operation, we will likely be requiring a self-declaration of that exemption status. Now, with respect to tourist accommodations, there's a number of parcels within the town that are currently zoned to permit tourist accommodations, and they do contain strata titled hotels and motels, and these zones would include the town center zone, the highway commercial zone, as well as the tourist commercial zone. Really, one of the key differences with the tourist accommodations and resort residential buildings is that tourist accommodations we would typically see as offering commercial temporary accommodations for the traveling public in buildings such as lodges, hotels, and motels and inns. However, where a resort residential building allows for residential use of the individual units, a tourist accommodation does not typically allow for the commercial use of sleeping units. So there's no residential component that exists for tourist accommodations. Next slide. But despite this, we have received previously queries regarding the residential use of these tourist accommodations, particularly within the strata titled hotel and motel situations. So really the challenge with these is similar to resort residential buildings. We don't monitor the use of each privately owned strata titled hotel or motel unit, and it's not known at this time whether these tourist accommodations are solely being used for commercial purposes. So I'll speak a bit more about kind of the point of bringing this up, but really because we are reviewing temporary accommodations as part of the STR review, there is seen to be merit to kind of explore this at the same time. So just a bit of details on community engagement. As council knows, a number of community engagement works have been undertaken leading up to the presentation of the proposed pilot program. We do see there being merit in further community engagement, given that there have been modifications made to the pilot program and with respect to the new legislative changes. So we would see this taking the form of solicitation of public feedback in response to the draft bylaws that have been prepared, which is quite standard in our bylaw amendment process. And in relation to the resort residential buildings and tourist accommodation buildings, we would recommend having targeted engagement with the stratas of these various strata titled operations, considering that they're so unique in the way that they operate. And we do want them to be aware of the implications of the exemption criteria, what their zoning currently allows, and to see whether or not it's really fitting and meshing with what they want to do. And a community workshop could also be another form of engagement that we could undertake as well. So with all that information in mind, we are seeking direction from council with respect to the proposed amendments, with the options being that we move forward with initiating the proposed amendments as presented, and that public engagement be initiated as well. But certainly we are open to hearing council's feedback with respect to those proposed bylaws and for revision. So thank you.
Wow. Would you like to repeat that? No. That's pretty amazing that, I mean, it's all in here. I've got it highlighted and underlined and everything else, but it's still very confusing. So thank you very much, Shannon, for for presenting that. It really sounds like you know what you're talking about, which is helpful. We'll see if anybody has any questions. I don't even know where to begin. Councillor King.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I guess I just look at the cost of the business license. I know we're a little outdated, it goes back to 1997 at $75 or $50 or whatever it was. And now you're proposing $750. That would make us the highest in the province in the RMI district. So I find that a little high. I wouldn't mind bringing that down $100 or $200 personally.
So just for clarity, Your Worship, Councillor King, this is for STRs. It's not for all business licenses, just so that you're. Yeah, okay.
I thought the same thing, actually. 750 was the highest and of that we can see, although it's a bit confusing because some of them, it depends on the number of bedrooms. So I agree with Councillor King on that one. I think it's a little bit high, but certainly happy to listen to others. Go ahead. Did you?
Yeah, I'm just speaking to that, Your Worship. You know, I think we have to realize that this is still a very costly program for us to implement. And it has, you know, it doesn't, you know, while we do benefit from the MRDT OAP side of it for the online access, there really isn't a whole lot of return otherwise. You know, these are properties in the past that, you know, we've had a majority of properties in the past that have operated outside of our zoning bylaw. The implementation of it's quite strong. We know there's a portion of it in our budget package for this year, just for the rollout implementation. There should be some cost recovery in there. I think that's what the residents are looking for. I mean, it's a very fine line. It's only what 51% that generally support it. We do need STRs, definitely, but I think there has to be, you know, there's an opportunity for us to actually, you know, bring something back from this in a positive matter. That, you know, they are, you know, benefiting greatly, you know, from the income that they are bringing in on their properties. That I think 750 is fair moving forward. Some of these other policies are fairly dated for some of these municipalities. That I think, given, you know, the amount there and some of the other components of it that we've, you know, taken back on, you know, whether it's a restriction on how many units, I think, you know, this is that fair balance between the two.
Go ahead, Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I sort of have to agree with Councillor Zach. I think the motels, hotels, resorts and stuff, their fees are way higher than the Airbnb. And so I think that if they want to play in that field with the motels, compete with them, I think they should be paying the same type of cost.
Go ahead, Councillor King.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I guess I just compare Whistler's $190 Sun Peaks just north of us, and those are the type of people we like here in the summer, is $500. So I still find $750 relatively very high.
Well, that's certainly one area that, that we need to maybe look at because there are differing opinions. Did you have anything to add, Chris?
I was just going to add for council's benefit, I think our plan with the community engagement part, if we get direction today, is to present basically what we presented to you as a council, and that would include the fees proposed for the business license and get input and come back to committee before you're asked to consider these bylaws at first reading. So you will get an opportunity to review all aspects of this pilot program again before you're asked to make any decisions. So with regard to the fee, I mean, certainly we'll take direction from council on that, but you might want to float the $700.50 fee and see what kind of feedback you receive on it.
Thank you. Now, I'm just wondering, the sort of the next steps, how, have you any ideas on how we get the community involved in this? Is it sending out a survey? Is it having some meetings at the Sonora Center like we did the last time? Were you leaving that kind of up to us, or did you have some suggestions?
So I think as a first step, having this information online so that any interested members of the public are able to review those draft amendment bylaws and submit any feedback to us to present to council at a future committee meeting. That would be, I think, very helpful. Certainly when it comes to any in-person or in the community events, I think we would be relying on our consulting group to help us with undertaking that side of the community engagement. And I'm not sure if Mr. Garish has anything he'd want to add to that.
I think generally we would approach it the same way we do most of these projects. So thinking back to the zoning bylaw, I mean, we had meetings, I think it was online and also here in the council chamber, put it out electronically, websites, newspaper ads. So we could certainly look at something similar for vacation rental view as a way to engage people. And I suspect it probably wouldn't happen until the new year, just because of the holidays and whatnot. So
Don't worry, we don't expect that to happen. Councillor Chong, did you have a question? Yeah.
Just to clarify, with Whistler's example, the 190 is for hotel business, 190 for campground, and then there's a tourist accommodation business licensing fee, which is $250 per guest unit. So with the pricing examples that was listed in the chart, was that for short-term rentals or was that for the hotel businesses?
The attachment that was provided in the report would have gone through the short-term rental specific application fees for business licenses.
Go ahead, Chris.
I might just add too, I mean, certainly benchmarking with other local governments is very helpful in relation to fees and regulations and whatnot. But I think with fees in particular, and of course my experience is more with the land use application fees. When establishing those types of fees, I think one of the biggest questions that a council or a board is asked to grapple with is the extent to which you want to subsidize it. Because I think most application fees are very rarely full cost recovery. So when you're looking at benchmarking your fees against other local governments, you also have to take into consideration the degree to which those councils might have wanted to maybe subsidize those applications fees more than say their neighbors or maybe you as a council are prepared to. So it's helpful to see where you rank, but I mean, there's other factors that those councils have probably taken into consideration when setting those fees, and also recognizing too, similar to your current business licensing bylaw. I mean, we didn't record the dates of some of those bylaws, but I wouldn't be surprised if some of them are in the same era as your current bylaw. And we recognize that local governments are challenged sometimes to review their fees, and so it could be many years since they looked at them.
Absolutely. They could be as old as ours, for sure. Go ahead, Councillor Poderica.
Just sorry, just for clarification. So just to clarify that there would be a one-time application fee and then an annual license, business license, is that correct?
Yes, so there would be an initial business license application fee and then subject to renewal fees into the future. There would also be an additional inspection fee to cover the costs of a building inspector going in and actually doing an inspection for health and safety. However, I don't believe that amount has been finalized at this point.
just follow up to that.
Yeah.
On the bed and breakfast side of it, being that we're treating them both the same way. On existing bed and breakfast, would we have that one time, would that application fee exist as well, or would they be grandfathered there? Or that would just be a business license fee at that point?
I might need some help here on this one, but so my understanding of the way we structured the fees in the draft bylaw was it would be a recurring annual fee of $750, and it would be applied equally to somebody declaring themselves as a short-term rental or somebody declaring themselves as a B&B, because the differentiation or distinction between the two is very slight.
Yeah.
And so rather than trying to take advantage of maybe a lesser fee for a B&B, which you may not actually qualify for, just treat them equally.
Oh, just wondering, sorry,
Get it.
and maybe I misunderstood. The first response was, let's say your first year, there'd be an application fee and a business license fee. So $1,500, is that correct? Or just a $750 one for the year, that initial?
I'll take a stab at it if you want to correct me if I miss anything. But so with the changes to the bylaw, we would be introducing it as a permitted use in the zone. So there would be no other approvals required, whether that be in the form of a rezoning or a temporary use permit. If you meet the regs as proposed, and you could go straight to business license, and that would be a $750 fee as proposed, and that would be applicable every year as an annual cost, and that would be it.
There's just, okay, okay.
Yeah.
I thought there was a addition, there was
Yeah.
the application fee separate from the business license fee.
Yeah, the only scenario in which I could see an additional fee potentially being required is if somebody came in and wanted to do 10 bedrooms with 20 people, and that didn't meet the regulations for a short-term rental, and so they might have to get council approval as a rezone or a TUP application, in which case then they're looking at those application costs as well as any business license if they're successful with their other applications. So
Okay, no, thanks for that. Thank you.
Councillor Chung.
Thank you. Kind of a more foundation basic question, but how does one prove that this property is their primary residence? Like, what is, how do you, is there a box you check and some sort of, could you provide some insight on that?
So that's the question that stumps the planners today. We've talked about that because of course the province is supposed to be helping with, I think, their registry of people who have a principal residence declaration or record with them or something. But with the business licensing application fees, we're asking for that documentation to confirm it's your principal residence, but we don't actually know what that physically looks like yet. But we're hopeful that it's a fairly simple process for people to get from the province if they've met the required definitions that are either, I can't recall if it's related to tax declarations or something on, anyway, yeah, I don't know if you have any.
I don't really have much to add to it, unfortunately. But yeah, I think really one of the biggest benefits that the town does get from having opted into the principal residence requirement is the province's data sharing through their STR portal. So I do think most of our reliance would be on really what can come of that portal and what can be supplied to the town.
And a follow-up, what's the status of the provincial registry? My understanding is it's late 2024 or early 2025. I think that was the proposed timeline.
So from staff level, I don't regularly work in the STR portal. I have seen kind of some of its capabilities at this time. It's, I think, something we'd have to look a bit more into to see what information we can garner from the portal.
So was it not November the 1st, 2024 that the principal residence requirement came into effect with the government? Is that correct? Yeah. So it should be in effect now. But whether we can get that information from them, that might be a little confusing. Okay, any other questions yeah, go ahead.
With regard to the municipal ticketing, because there was a little bit of confusion, because I know by opting in, we can have up to 50,000 for like a fine. I remember reading that number somewhere. But to clarify with our proposed changes to the MTI bylaw, the change from 1,000 to 3,000, those funds go towards us directly. Because I heard that some of the finding may not go directly to local governments. It would actually go to the province and then it would be divided out. But I'm not 100% sure if that's just rumor or what the structure was. So just wanted to get some clarification.
I can
Chris?
I
go
can
ahead.
start on that, but then I might kick
Okay.
it over to town staff. So through the mayor, so my understanding is ticketing, any fines collected by ticketing would revert to the town and then you would assign them to the applicable fund. They did increase the maximum amount under the Offense Act, which was from 10,000 to 50,000. But that's not actually a fine that the council can impose or the town can impose. That's only done through the courts. So you'd have to go through injunctive
Okay.
action, and then the courts would have to find a party guilty and then assign a fine up to now potentially $50,000. But that's the only way that higher fine can be done. So that's my basic understanding.
Thank you. That's good. Councillor Chong?
And also just to clarify, there were 4 parcels, I think it was a CT4 zoning.
Mhm.
And there's proposed public engagement. Would those parcels be directly reached out to for more direct conversation, or is it more general?
Yeah, it would be the intent to reach out to them directly. It would start with us coming up with a list, trying to figure out, I mean, because there's only 4 of the resort commercial type operations, that's a bit easy. But having to kind of nail down the various tourist accommodation parcels as well.
And then if some of those parcels may not fully qualify, would they have the opportunity to make certain changes to qualify for our short-term rental regulation, or is the kind of ship sailed at this point?
I believe this would provide those operations with an opportunity to present, rationale to council, why they would want to change their zoning, for example, in order to allow for more residential uses of their tourist accommodation units. So ultimately, the decision would come back to council to make.
Okay. Chris, did you have something else?
I was just going to add for council, just as a reminder, I mean, when we did the zoning bylaw review, we actually had one of those situations occur where we had a property owner come
Yeah.
in concerned about the proposed zoning to replace their CD zone, recognizing the changes that had happened with Short-Term Rental Accommodation Act and the way they were using their property. So as I recall, I think we had a discussion with council at that point. This was their zoning, but this is how they wanted to proceed going forward with all the new changes. And then I think council supported them in that. So it may be that maybe with some of these 4, or even with some of the commercial ones in the downtown zone and whatnot, that you might have similar requests come before you as part of this.
So it might take us a while to go through this. Okay, so if there's any other questions, well, the recommendation is that the proposed bylaw amendments contained in draft OCP amendment bylaw number 1375.07, draft zoning bylaw number 1395.04, draft MTI bylaw number 1279.25, and draft business license bylaw number 1400 be initiated. So that means just get started, and that public engagement on the proposed OCP and zoning bylaw amendments be initiated. Councillor Chong, or Poderica, Councillor Chong. All in favor? Thank you very much. Certainly gives us a start on this for sure. So thank you. Yeah, amazing. Okay, thanks very much. And we will now go on to the corporate asset management policy. Is that Mr. Risling?
Thank you, Your Worship. We're just going to bring up a slideshow. So we've talked a lot about asset management over the last 2 to 3 years, or since this term started. There's been a lot of talk, even going to events like SILGA and UBCM. It's really the foundation to ensure that a municipality's sustainability. Next slide. So there have been some municipalities that have started their asset management journey 20, even 30 years ago, but it became a requirement of local governments in 2009. Council adopted a tangible asset management policy to support the PSAB requirements in 2010. So this is when it first started becoming more of a mandatory aspect to how a municipality operates from a financial sustainability perspective. So really, why this was brought into place is so that municipalities were aware of their assets and were able to plan for the future. So there is increased pressure put on municipalities to actually adopt a policy. And I think what's important to know, so there hasn't been too much from the provincial and federal governments as far as it's been more of a soft launch. But what they are doing, as council has heard before, is they're putting more and more criteria within grant applications, and this is one. So there are some grants out there that if you don't have a policy, you get fewer points. So this is one piece that's getting closer to, I guess, meeting all these grant requirements, which we so desperately require in a lot of our projects. So that tangible asset management policy that was passed about 15 years ago solely focuses on the physical measurable assets. An asset management policy is more than that, and it's a lot more comprehensive. It provides an overall framework from which to manage your overall assets. And I think we've talked previously about just how detailed some of those plans can go. So you can get right down to the bolts, in a structure. That's not something that we need to do, but we need to get a lot better than what we've been doing. And council and the public has seen asset management plans with regards to our utilities that were presented in excess of a year ago. Those weren't down to the absolute bolt, but it definitely provided us with a lot more guidance as to what our assets are and the conditions and a schedule for replacement, and most importantly, a financial plan to deal with those depreciating assets. So again, this has been around for a long time. And again, a lot of municipalities are there, some are in the midstream, and some are just in the infancy. But once you set up a policy, that's kind of the overarching document. As council is aware, we received, on the utility side, plus even last council meeting or committee of the whole meeting, there was a report provided, an overview of our buildings. And so that gave a bit of a snapshot on where we're at as far as what we think the expected life is and what the expected replacement cost is, and the amount that we should be putting aside to replace those assets once their economic life or functional life is completed. And so, yeah, this is a very comprehensive program. Again, this policy is very high level. The foundational pieces are much more important. And again, you saw a couple of them, but there's a lot more things that need to be done. And most of it is culturally, meaning embedded into the culture of the administration so that asset management is part of our daily, weekly, maybe monthly tasks, that we're looking at assets from a status perspective or a state of condition perspective and documenting that. So as we move forward with our financial sustainability model, we have a better idea as to what assets we have and how much we should be putting aside to keep that asset in play, and most importantly, actually make it have as long of life as possible. Even in the last 2 weeks, I think council's heard of some of our issues. Probably about 2 months ago, we brought forward a report where our HVAC system at Sonora Center was at that state where it may not have been able to have heat in the building over the winter. So we did a budget adjustment to make the repairs of $25,000 to the HVAC units. If you had a really thorough policy and actually, more importantly, the procedures in place administratively, a lot of those maybe one-offs wouldn't be one-offs. They'd actually be part of a plan, and we'd be more proactive in replacing a lot of this equipment. Just last week, the Public Works building started leaking. I think I informed some people we thought it was the office structure, but it's actually the shop area. So that roof is going to require replacement, approximately $100,000, and it wasn't in our plan. And so we really need to get a handle, document these types of things so that we can provide council with information so that we can prepare better, or at least have the ability to provide that information so the council can make better informed decisions. So again, there's a lot more, this policy is the higher level, and there's a lot more work that needs to be done to make this a truly informative piece of work that can help drive decisions of council. Yeah, this has been around for a while. Asset Management BC is provided a lot of material. FCM, a lot of organizations have provided information to municipalities to get on this program. And again, what we want to do is establish a policy, and then it just doesn't end there. Again, there's a lot more pieces. We need to embed it within our culture, set up policies, procedures, and resources to actually collect this information. And again, it's not something that you do and then put on the shelf. It's something that has to become part of your culture and like weekly or monthly tasks. So at the end of the day, again, this is a high-level policy. It was part of Council's strategic priorities chart. It's the first step in the overall asset management, I guess, a suite of things that we need to do. But Council has seen it as a priority and has made a lot of progress in that regard, especially on the utility side. And so we're basically asking if Council would like to proceed with this high-level policy at the next Council meeting, or if this is something that we want to wait until we actually have a lot more supporting documentation to bring forward. Again, I want to emphasize the fact from an administration perspective, I think it's important to pass it. And the reason why I'm saying that in this particular case is that it is a piece that can assist us with grants. And from an administration perspective, I think I'd like to have a lot of supporting documentation in place, but with our resourcing availability and that type of thing, I'm not sure when a lot of that other material can be implemented, and therefore to improve our chances of getting grants, I think this would be one of the things that council may want to consider. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Risling. Did somebody have a question? Go ahead, Councillor King, and then Councillor Poderica.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I think it's just some schematics here on the admonition on your policy. I think under purpose, there should be some 1-1s, 1-2s, 1-3s. Not a big deal, just that they are missing when you look at your chart.
Dear Worship, I mean, it can be done. It is intended to be kind of an all-inclusive type introduction to the policy. I mean, if council would like that change, we could, but again, it was intended to be an overarching type summary.
No,
If you're talking 1.0,
well, yeah, like you need a 1.1 because you identify in 2.32, you're starting with 1.1, 1.2, 2.1. So you got a reference there. So where do I find them?
thank you very much.
I didn't catch that either,
I mean,
so,
it's just
yeah.
schematic. It's not the end of the world. I support the document. It's just things
Oh,
that if they're going to
So
read.
actually, Councillor King, that is referencing the last page. So the chart.
Oh,
So if you go 2 more pages down, 33 of
I
33,
got that.
that's what it's referencing.
Okay, reference number 4. So it's doing the whole column.
So 1.1
I got that.
is
Yep. 1.2. I got
basic
that.
asset inventory.
Yeah, I got no problem with that. It's just when it says 0.4, does that mean the whole column? 4.0 it says. 4 dot.
refer
Maybe it's
to
missing that
chart
number.
2.1.
0.1 and 2.1. And then it has a period and then it says 4. We're not sure
Yeah, the
what that
4
is.
is what I'm relating to. What's the 4 mean?
Maybe
Maybe it's 4.1 or something? I mean, it's not the end of the world.
Yep.
I support
Nope,
the
thank you.
document. It's just like
Thank
a
you.
little bit of numbers there to relate properly.
Yep. Maybe I thanks for picking that up, and we'll
Yeah.
make the change.
Yeah, that's
Thank you.
good. Thanks, no problem. It shows I read the
Yep.
document.
Did you
Well,
have a
that's good.
question?
Comment.
Okay.
Thank you, Worship. First off, I thank administration obviously for the great work they have done in terms of increasing our understanding and our presence of our asset management plans.
especially over the last 2 years. This has allowed council to really be able to see the big picture and help us make some of those, hopefully those corrective actions that in the past may have not have happened. We know, as our recent asset management seminar in West Kelowna, we've seen where municipalities have made those harder decisions earlier in life, but there is a community that really understands asset management on Vancouver Island that's been able to make those small adjustments earlier in life that have actually saved their asset management and their infrastructure deficits by 50% in the long run, which is huge. We're talking millions, hundreds of millions of dollars for small communities that have benefited from those changes and those conversations that have taken place much earlier on than others. And we know, while we're still early in our asset management process, we are further ahead than others who are still just understanding, what does that fully entail. And I'd like to thank again, thanks to the administration for the work that they've done over the last little bit to help us get on the right track.
Thank you very much. And that's absolutely correct. So the recommendation is that council receive the presentation on asset management policy for information and request that administration bring the policy forward for consideration at the January 14th, 2025 regular council meeting. That's only a month from now, and there's Christmas and New Year's in between. Is that enough time or you're gonna sort of fix this one up and bring it back, or
Yes, so your worship, yeah, there's not much we're going to be doing other than
just
looking at that number
bring-
and bringing
okay.
it forward. Again, this is just, I guess it's just really signaling the importance of
Yes.
asset management to the community and basically telling the administration that, yeah, we got to keep rowing in that direction. So it's been just the first step of many that we got to continue doing. Again, I think there's been a lot of work done already, but there's a lot more. So
Absolutely.
it's just
Thank
pushing
you.
us along. Thank you.
And then you.
So the cycle image that was provided in the report, the first time, because I did a search using that just so I can find the source of it, so I could read the original report. That was first published from what I could find in 2015. So it's not a new concept. I think it's newly been prioritized. So I also found another report in 2017, only 19% of local governments have developed at least one asset management plan. So that's a low number. I'm assuming that number has crept up from 19%. I haven't read a more recent number. But by implementing this type of plan and more specific policies, this puts us ahead of many other local governments, which means if and when there are grant funding streams, as Mr. Rising has already spoken to, this again puts us closer to the top of the line. So in addition to cost savings with continual maintenance and assessment of our assets, it does save the taxpayer a lot of money. So it's not going to be an easy process. It's going to be continuous. There's never an end to it. But I completely 100% support this initiative. So I'd like to make that motion. The first motion.
The recommended motion.
Yes.
Sure. You're seconding that. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I really think that it was so helpful of Silga to put on that workshop, and several of us were there, which was quite helpful, and it really pointed out what some of the other communities were doing and how even a small community, smaller than us, had made some changes. And so it's doable. It just takes time and, of course, some money to make sure that we're on the right track. But I think it's a good thing. So it's been moved and seconded. And absolutely. I'm sorry, Myers. Yeah, you have a question.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm just a little confused. The first one is we received the presentation and the administration bring the policy forward January 14th, or we allow the administration to continue developing the asset management strategy and detailed plan. I don't see what the difference really is. I'm for it to continue ahead, but I don't know why we would say, well, just bring us something back in January. Why wouldn't we just do it now? Why would we wait till January 14th for another presentation?
Through the chair, you absolutely can. We can put it on this afternoon. Council so chooses. Sometimes it, because this is just such an important topic, you can get some feedback from the public, that type of thing. But absolutely, this is a pretty high level document. Council has talked about it now for like 2 years. Definitely administration be in favor of proceeding this afternoon with approval.
Would the the cost to continue developing the asset management policy, that'd be part of the budget? There'd be some cost where you're on number 2, right? That we just say, go ahead and continue doing it. If there's extra cost to do that, that comes back to council anyway, right?
So, yeah, this is a multifaceted piece, and depending on how fast we want to move, you are correct. We do have funding available this year to do the transportation asset management plan. We are looking at the in this year's budget to do basically an asset management plan for the agricultural system. So that's in front of council here over the next few months. There are also grants available to assist with asset management planning, which we've been able to capitalize on some, but it's something that we can continue to capitalize on. The big piece is actually putting together some of the reserves, and in addition to that, what the public heard a couple of weeks ago is actually have maintenance budgets within the town's administration to fix things that we've seen in the even the last month. So it is such a big piece here. As far as funding, you're absolutely correct. To meet some of the benchmarks and things that the town requires, money will need to be put aside so that we could capitalize on grants. I think a lot of times we come here and we say, well, to apply for this grant, you need matching funding or 30-cent dollars. So it's so critical to put some of that money aside so that when these grant opportunities come available, we can leverage that for 2 to 1. So yeah, over the next month or two, I think it's important for council and the public to be aware of some of these things that we may want to do to capitalize on grants and build for the current and the future. Does that help?
Yep, thank you for clarifying.
So we could either decide to add this on to the agenda this afternoon, because this is just the committee of the whole meeting, or we can leave it until January. At the moment, we're leaving it till January. Is that what we would choose to do?
An additional question then, if we were to bring it to this afternoon, would it be at the same level of detail as if it were in January 14th?
Right now, we'd keep it exactly the same, except for that item that was brought up, which
Yeah.
really requires a dash. So we'd amend that policy between the 2.1 and the 4 to be a dash, and that would be the only change that would come forward. Administration is going to be doing no additional work within the next month on this.
Okay.
Zero.
And
Unless
So-
council
I'll just
chooses
friendly
to-
amend my motion. So that to bring it, instead of January 14th, to just bring it to regular council of today.
Today. So that's moved and seconder. They're okay with that? All in favor? Thank you very much. Boy. Okay. Don't even get a chance to say, is there anything else before he terminates? No, you're seconding the termination.